The night I learned the truth, I remember the smell first. Not the words, not the shouting, just the smell of wet earth on my palms as I dug for a future that no longer existed. That's how it began, with my hands in the dirt behind my old house, searching for a document I'd kept hidden for 14 years, half trembling, half praying it was all a misunderstanding. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the quiet hum of the crickets and the distant barking of dogs, I already knew. The truth was waiting for me, and it wasn't kind. I wasn't digging for gold. I wasn't digging for secrets. I was digging for hope. Hope that the plot of land I'd saved for my nephew's education still belonged to him. It didn't. And the people who took it from him were the two people I once trusted most in this world, my brother, Kashif, and my childhood best friend, Mariam. But before I tell you how they broke us, I need to take you back to the beginning, to a time when life was quieter, simpler, and full of the kind of faith you only give before someone teaches you not to. People often say grief makes you older, wiser. I was 28 the year my sister died, but her death aged me in a way no calendar ever could. Her son, Ayan, was only 2 at the time, still sleeping with his fists curled like little shells, still babbling half words, still reaching for a mother who would never come back. My sister's husband didn't stay long after the funeral. Some men run from responsibility like it's fire. I didn't blame him, not out loud, but every time I looked at Ayan, a small bruise formed somewhere in my chest, knowing the world had already failed him twice. So I raised him, not because I was strong, not because I was brave, but because love sometimes walks into your life wearing someone else's face, and you don't question it. You just take it in your arms and call it yours. Our life was modest but peaceful. Ayan grew up thinking my small 2-bedroom house was the whole universe. He'd sit beside me every morning as I made tea, tapping the counter with his tiny spoon like a drummer warming up his soul. And even though money was tight, tighter than I ever admitted out loud, we survived. People whispered that a single woman raising a boy alone couldn't do much for his future. I let them whisper, because I had a plan. When my father passed, he left behind several small pieces of land distributed among us 3 siblings. I received the smallest one, a plot barely large enough to build a modest home, the kind of thing people shrug at and say, "Bus, tike, at least something." But to me, it was everything. I never intended to sell it, never intended to build on it. I wanted to keep it safe, like a quiet promise waiting in the soil. "This," I whispered to Ayan one evening when he was 10, pointing to the file wrapped in plastic. "This is your college fund. No matter what happens in life, this land will be your ladder." He didn't understand then, but he hugged me so fiercely I could feel his heartbeat against my ribs. And that was enough. Kashif and I, we've always had a complicated bond. He was the eldest, I was the middle child. Everything about him was loud, his voice, his presence, even the way he walked. He wasn't a bad man, just entitled, in a way firstborn sons often are in families like ours. And then there was Mariam. We'd been best friends since school, 2 girls who used to share doodles on the backs of notebooks, steal samosas from each other's lunchboxes, and whisper secrets after lights out during sleepovers. She was the first person I cried to after my sister died, the first person to help me buy diapers and baby clothes for Ayan, the first person to hug me without saying, "Be strong," which is sometimes the cruelest thing a grieving woman can hear. Life has a strange way of weaving people together. I never expected Kashif and Mariam to fall in love, but when they did, I didn't fight it. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply smiled, softly, carefully, and told them I was happy for them. The truth is, it warmed me. Two people I loved finding love in each other. Who wouldn't want that? Their wedding was small, just family, but I remember something from that day I should have paid more attention to. When I hugged them both after the nikah, Mariam whispered in my ear, "We'll always be by your side. Ayan's future is our future too." At the time, those words felt like a blessing. Years later, they would feel like a warning. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after they married. Kashif found a job in the city. Mariam started helping me tutor neighborhood children for pocket money. Ayan grew taller, louder, funnier, his laughter filling rooms like warm light. He was 16 when he first mentioned wanting to be an engineer. I remember pouring tea into chipped cups as he spoke, his voice trembling with excitement. "Auntie, mekarasakta you think I can really do it?" I brushed his hair back and nodded. "I've been preparing for your future before you could even walk." And it was true, except I wasn't the only one who knew about the land anymore. I'd told Kashif and Mariam years ago, trusting them, leaning on them, believing that family strengthens a promise, not weakens it. I didn't know then that I had placed my most fragile hope into the hands of the wrong people. But life gives clues, sometimes tiny, sometimes loud. For me, the first clue came on a winter evening when Kashif stopped by unexpectedly. His clothes smelled faintly of gasoline and dust, like he'd driven in a hurry. He walked around my house with restless eyes, opening and closing drawers as if looking for something he wouldn't name. When I asked him he was okay, he forced a smile, too quick, too sharp. "Bus, checking if you need anything. Mariam said you were worried about expenses." I wasn't, and she hadn't visited that entire week. It was a small moment, a strange one, but I brushed it aside. In family, we often choose ignorance long before truth chooses us. And that was just the beginning. The second clue came a few months later, wrapped in something as ordinary as a conversation over dinner. Mariam and Kashif had invited us to their home. They lived in a modest portion, clean, warm, always smelling faintly of her rose-scented attar. Ayan loved going there because Mariam spoiled him like a son, piling extra rice on his plate and smacking his hand playfully whenever he tried to steal a kebab before the naan arrived. That evening, things felt off. Kashif was distracted, tapping his fingers against the table. Mariam kept adjusting her dupatta, smoothing it nervously even though it wasn't out of place. And every time Ayan mentioned college plans, they exchanged quick glances, too quick, too practiced. I pretended not to notice. After dinner, as Ayan washed his hands, Kashif leaned back in his chair. "You know," he began, voice casual in the way people speak when they're hiding something, "sometimes land isn't a stable asset. Anything could happen. Market crashes, disputes, government takeovers." I looked at him slowly. "Why are you saying this?" He shrugged. "Just thinking, maybe you shouldn't rely on that plot alone for Ayan's future." Mariam nodded too quickly. "Yes, Appa, you should diversify, maybe put some savings elsewhere." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes kept shifting away from mine, like a child afraid of being caught. A coldness spread through my stomach. "Why are you suddenly concerned about the land?" I asked. There was a flicker, one that passed over both their faces at the same time, a tiny shadow of guilt. But before anything else could be said, Ian returned, laughing about something he heard on TV, and the conversation dissolved. Still, that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I kept replaying that moment. People who mean well speak clearly. People who don't speak around the truth like it's a sleeping monster they're afraid to wake. Ian graduated with excellent marks, top of his class. I remember the day he brought home his acceptance letter from the engineering university. He held it out to me with shaking hands, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and fear. "Auntie, we did it." We. He said we, like he knew this dream belonged to both of us. I held him against my chest and cried, quietly so he wouldn't feel the tremor in my chest. He was standing on the brink of a new life, and I was carrying the weight of making sure he stepped into it with dignity. College wasn't cheap. Neither were hostel fees, books, transportation. But that's what the land was for. I had kept that file wrapped in plastic for 14 years, hidden inside an old trunk behind my house, the one place I believed no one would look. One morning, after Ian left for school, I went to retrieve the papers so I could begin the process of valuing the land. But when I opened the trunk, the air left my lungs. The plastic was there, the cloth band was there, but the file was gone. Missing. My hands shook as I pulled everything apart. Old blankets, childhood drawings, broken ornaments, the tray set my mother received at her wedding. But no file, no papers, no documents. For a long moment, I just stood there in the quiet yard, listening to the distant sound of a neighbor sweeping their porch. Then I whispered, almost to myself, "No, this can't be." I went inside and tore open every cupboard, every drawer, every corner of my home, but the result didn't change. Someone had entered my house. Someone had taken the papers, and only 3 people in the world knew where they were kept. My sister, she was gone, me, and Mariam. My first instinct wasn't anger, it was disbelief, sharp and painful. I told myself maybe I'd misplaced it, maybe I'd moved it months ago and forgotten. Grief has a way of making you forget things, names, dates, locations. Why not this too? But denial only lasts so long. That evening, I called Mariam. My fingers trembled so hard I nearly dropped the phone. She answered cheerfully, her voice too bright. "Appa, how are you?" "Mariam, I need your help. The papers to Ian's land, they're missing." There was silence, a long one, too long. Then she laughed lightly, forced, high-pitched. "Oh, really? Missing? From the trunk?" I froze. "I never told you it was the trunk," I said quietly. Another silence. I could almost hear her heartbeat through the phone. "Oh, yes you did," she stammered. "Years ago, I remember." "No," I said, the world tightening around me. "I only told you there was a safe place. I never said where." She didn't reply. Not one word. "Mariam," I whispered, "please tell me, do you know anything about this? Let me ask Kashif. Maybe he saw something." Her tone was crumbling, breaking. Before I could speak again, she said, "I'll call you back," and hung up. She never did. 2 days later, the truth arrived, not through a confession, but through a phone call from the land registry office. A man with a flat, bored voice said, "Madam, the land transfer is complete. The property is now under the new buyer's name." My throat went dry. What transfer? I didn't sign anything." He paused. "Your power of attorney did." "My what?" "Your brother, madam. Kashif Ahmed, he submitted your authorization documents last month. I felt my knees buckle. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. And the buyer's name? I breathed. He told me. And when he did, my entire world tilted, because the buyer wasn't a stranger. It was my best friend, Mariam. She had bought the very land I was saving for the child she used to rock to sleep. My voice cracked. Did they sell it already? Yes, madam. Sold 2 days ago. Funds transferred. To whom? He hesitated, then said, to themselves. Joint account. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had stolen my nephew's future with signatures they forged using trust I had handed them freely. And the worst part? They had planned it, quietly, secretly, for months. I didn't remember leaving my house. I didn't remember locking the gate behind me. I didn't even remember crossing the street. All I remember is the sound of my own breathing, sharp, uneven, echoing in my ears as I walked toward my brother's home. The evening sun hung low, turning the dusty lane into a strip of burnt gold. Children played cricket nearby, their laughter slicing through the air. A woman watered her plants. Someone's pressure cooker whistled in the distance. Life was moving like it always did, only mine had stopped. When I reached their doorstep, I didn't knock at first. I just stared at the wooden door, at the small scratch near the handle, at the faint smell of frying onions drifting from inside. Then, very slowly, I raised my hand and knocked. 3 times. Firm, steady, despite the storm in my chest. Miriam opened the door. The moment she saw me, her face drained of color. She didn't even try to smile this time. Her hand trembled on the doorknob. "Appa," she whispered, you came?" "Where's Kashif?" My voice was calm, too calm. "He's in the room," she said weakly. I stepped inside without waiting. Kashif was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. When he saw me, he straightened, but not from guilt. No, from annoyance, as if my presence was an inconvenience. "What's going on?" he asked, placing the phone aside. "Why are you here like this?" I didn't speak right away. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the man who had cried in my lap when our mother died. This was the boy who used to run barefoot on the mud street, scraping his knees and asking me to blow on the wound so it wouldn't sting. This was the brother I protected like he was my own child. But now he sat there with a closed-off expression, like a stranger wearing my brother's face. "I got a call from the registry office." His fingers tightened just slightly, barely visible, but I saw it. And they told me the land transfer was completed. Silence. I continued, my voice steady. Then they told me the land was sold, funds transferred to a joint account. Nothing. "But you already know that," I said quietly. Kashif sighed, long and irritated, like he was tired of the conversation before it even began. "Appa, please, don't make a big issue out of this." A laugh escaped me, short, disbelieving. "Don't make a big issue? You stole Ayan's future." He stood up abruptly. "I did what was necessary." "Necessary?" I whispered. "You forged my signatures. You lied. You planned this. "I didn't forge anything," he snapped. "Your signatures were already on the old documents. I used them." "You took my papers!" My voice finally cracked. "You entered my home and stole them!" Miriam flinched behind me, but didn't speak. Kashif crossed his arms. "Appa, you act like I did something wrong. The land was part of the family inheritance. I'm your brother. I have a right." "Not to what I bought. Not to what I saved for 14 years. Not to what your sister trusted you with."
He looked away, jaw tightening. "You never treated me fairly," he muttered. "You always got more. Even when Abu was alive, he favored you. I got nothing." Ah, there it was, the truth beneath the betrayal. Resentment, fermented over years like a poison he kept drinking until it burned everything inside him. "Kashif," I said softly, "I raised your son. I fed him. I educated him. I stayed awake at night with him when he cried. What more did you want from me?" He didn't answer. For a moment, the room felt suffocating. Then I turned to Miriam. "Why?" I asked her. "Why did you do this?" Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "Appa, I didn't want to. I swear. It was Kashif's idea. We were struggling financially. He said the land was technically part of your share, and since you're unmarried, you don't need it the way we do." The words sliced through me. Unmarried, as if that meant my life had less value, as if my sacrifices counted for nothing. "You both knew that land was for Ayan. You knew what it meant to me." Miriam covered her face with her hands and sobbed. But guilt is not the same as remorse. Kashif remained silent, staring at the wall. Just when the tension reached its breaking point, the front door opened. Ayan stepped in, holding his backpack. His face lit up when he saw me. "Auntie, you didn't tell me you were coming." He paused, looked around. The silence, the tear-streaked face of Miriam, my clenched fists, Kashif's rigid posture. "Kashif, what happened?" I didn't want him to find out like this, but truth has a way of arriving before we're ready. I turned to him, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Ayan, the land, the one your mother left, the one I kept for you." He waited. "It's gone." "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "Kashif and Miriam sold it." For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak. Then his breath shook. His backpack fell from his hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. You sold my future?" His voice cracked as he looked at them. Kashif snapped. "Don't talk like that. You'll get other opportunities." Ayan stepped back, hurt carving itself into his face like something permanent. "Uncle, you raised me like a son, and now you took the one thing my mother left me with?" Kashif opened his mouth, but no explanation could survive in the quiet heaviness of that room. Ayan turned to me, his eyes wet. "Auntie, let's go." His voice wasn't angry, it was broken. And sometimes broken is worse than angry. We left their home without another word.
Ayan and I walked home in silence. The streetlights flickered on one by one, throwing long shadows across the road. Every step felt heavy, like the earth was pulling at our feet. A stray dog barked somewhere in the distance. An old man cycled past us with a soft ring of his bell. The world was moving, but we were not. When we reached the house, Ayan headed straight to his room. He didn't shut the door loudly. He didn't cry out. He just closed it with a quiet click, and somehow that small sound felt worse than any scream. I sat on the sofa, staring at the empty teacup left from the morning. The faint smell of cardamom still clung to it. Everything looked exactly the same, yet nothing felt the same. My chest ached, not with anger, but with a grief so deep it almost felt like a second death. First his mother, now this blow. I didn't know how long I sat there, maybe minutes, maybe hours. The house felt too quiet, as if it was grieving with us. Finally, I stood up and walked to Ayan's room. I knocked gently. "Ayan, can I come in?" A small voice answered, "Yes." I pushed the door open. He sat on the floor, leaning against his bed, legs pulled to his chest. His eyes were red, but tears no longer fell.
Some hurts are too big for tears. I sat beside him without speaking. After a while, he whispered, "Why would he do that, Auntie?" I looked at him, this boy who wasn't mine by blood, but mine by every heartbeat I had offered him. "Kashif has his reasons," I said softly. "Wrong reasons, but reasons. He let bitterness grow inside him. Sometimes what we fail to heal becomes the thing that destroys us." He nodded slowly, his chin trembling. "I trusted him," he murmured. "So did I replied. We let the silence settle again, but this silence felt different, like a blanket rather than a wall. After a long pause, Ayan said, "What do we do now?" There it was, the question that had been hovering in both our minds. I took a slow breath. "We rebuild," I said, "piece by piece. Future isn't land, future isn't money. It's the choices we make now, after the hurt." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he leaned his head on my shoulder, and I held him the way I used to when he was 5, scared of thunder. The next morning I woke before Fajr. My eyes were swollen. Sleep had come in short, restless bursts. The house was still, but not peaceful, the kind of stillness that follows a storm. I made tea, one for me, one for Ayan, and placed his cup outside his door. When he emerged later, his hair messy and his eyes tired, he gave me a small smile. Not happy, not healed, but trying, which was enough for me. "Auntie," he said quietly, "I want to meet my friend at the college office today, just to ask about scholarships, see what's even possible now." His voice wavered, but there was determination beneath it. He was trying to stand, despite the blow, despite the betrayal. And I felt a small spark of pride. "Of course," I said. "I'll go with you." But he shook his head. "Let me go alone this time." He swallowed. "I need to feel capable, even if everything feels upside down." I nodded. Sometimes love is stepping forward with someone. Sometimes love is stepping back and letting them walk. "Be careful," I said. He nodded, grabbed his backpack, and paused at the door. "Auntie, thank you for everything." Then he left. By noon, the neighborhood already knew something had happened. In small towns, news travels faster than wind. Women sweeping outside their homes paused to glance at me. A shopkeeper offered me free bread with a sympathetic smile. 2 old men sitting on a charpai muttered under their breath as I passed. It wasn't the whisper of curiosity, it was the whisper of scandal. And I knew why, because Kashif and Mariam had already begun telling their version. I heard the first piece from the milk vendor. "Baji," he said carefully, "I heard you forced your brother to sign away his share, and when he sold it, you got angry?" I froze. That's what they were spreading? That I had taken from them? That I was the reason for the conflict? My throat tightened, but I managed a polite smile. People will believe what they want, but the truth remains the truth, even in silence. He nodded, embarrassed to have repeated the rumor. When I walked home, I saw Mariam standing at her gate talking to a neighbor. The moment she saw me, she froze. Her face was pale, eyes puffy from crying, but her chin lifted slightly. Defensive, not apologetic. She whispered something to the neighbor, who glanced at me with an uncomfortable mix of pity and judgment. And something inside me grew tired. Not angry, not wounded, just tired. Because betrayal from your own blood already breaks you once, but betrayal followed by lies, that tries to break you again, and publicly. I turned and went inside without a word. That evening, Ayan returned, exhausted but hopeful. "Auntie," he said, "the counselor gave me a list of scholarships. It's a long process, but maybe it's not impossible." I hugged him. Progress, no matter how small, is still progress. Then I went to my room and opened my old metal trunk. Inside lay a folder of documents, original land papers, receipts, and a photocopy of the land deed. As I sifted through them, my fingers trembled. One line caught my eye. Land purchased solely under the name of the buyer, Farzana Bibi. My name. No mention of kashif, no mention of shared ownership. My throat tightened. They hadn't just betrayed me, they hadn't just lied, they had taken something that legally, morally, wholly belonged to me and to Ayan, and they had twisted the story to protect themselves. For the first time since the betrayal, something inside me shifted. A quiet resolve, a calm strength, a belief that maybe, just maybe, this fight wasn't over. Not yet. Not for me. Not for Ayan. I closed the trunk gently. The night outside was still, but inside me, a decision had been made.
I don't remember driving home that evening. I only remember the shape of the steering wheel under my hands and the way my fingers trembled against it, like the truth had set fire to my bones. Every streetlight I passed blurred into a streak of yellow, and for a moment I wondered if this was how people felt right before fainting, when the world is too heavy to carry and too real to escape. At home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. That's how you know peace has left a place. The silence isn't calm anymore. It's hollow. I sat on the edge of my bed and pressed my palms over my face. I kept seeing the same moment again and again. Salim standing there, his jaw clenched, Farah looking everywhere but at me, and my nephew, my boy, clinging to his admission letter like he was holding on to a dream slipping out of his fingers. A plot of land I had protected for 16 years, gone. Taken by the very two people who told me, "We're family, we'll help you secure his future." I didn't know if I was angry, heartbroken, or simply exhausted from carrying everything alone. Maybe it was all three, mixed like the smoke from a fire that hadn't finished burning. But after an hour of sitting in the dark, letting the night wrap itself around me like cold water, something changed. A stillness settled inside me. Not acceptance, no, a different kind of quiet. Resolve. For 16 years, I had raised my nephew, fed him, taught him, wiped his tears when he thought remembering his mother was too painful. And now, when his future finally touched his hands, someone else had ripped it away. No, I would not let that stand. I stood up, grabbed a notebook, and wrote down everything I knew. Dates, conversations, land documents, bank slips, every promise Salim and Farah had ever made about the boys' college fund. I filled page after page until my handwriting turned into scratches. When I finished, I leaned back in my chair and breathed, slow and steady, the way I used to when life forced me to grow up too soon. The next morning, I went to the land registry office. People think betrayal is just an emotion, a sting inside the chest, but betrayal also lives in paper, in signatures, in dates that don't match,
in missing receipts and faces that suddenly become nervous when they see you. The officer pulled out the file, glanced at me, and paused. "Madam, the transfer was done fast," he said softly. "Too fast. Someone pushed it through." Someone. Someone who knew how to. Someone with influence or connections or familiarity with the system. My brother-in-law fit all three. "Who signed the final approval?" I asked. The man hesitated, scratched the back of his head, and flipped the page. "Your brother-in-law, technically speaking." I felt a sharpness rise in my chest, not pain, not anger, but clarity. They didn't just betray me, they planned it, step by step, quietly, strategically, all while sitting in my living room, sipping tea, complimenting my cooking, asking about the boys' grades, saying things like, "We'll do our part, he's our responsibility too." I thanked the officer, walked out of the building, and sat in my car, letting the afternoon sun fall across my lap. And for the first time in all of this, I cried. Not the loud, messy kind, but the kind where tears fall silently and steadily, like rain sliding down a closed window, soft, persistent, unstoppable. When I finally wiped my face, I felt something shift inside me. A line had been drawn, not by me, but by them. If they could hand my nephew's future away without flinching, then I didn't owe them silence or patience or the benefit of the doubt. I went home and called a lawyer. He listened carefully, then said in a steady voice, "Do not confront them without legal support, not yet. Let's gather proof properly. This is a financial deception within family, and those cases can turn ugly fast." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Ugly. The words sat heavy on my tongue. Because what could be uglier than someone you trusted using your love against you? The next few days became a blur of documents, calls, photocopies, witness statements, and late-night prayers. My nephew watched me with worried eyes, but I smiled at him every time and said, "It's just paperwork, Beta. You focus on your studies." But inside, I was stitching myself back together one thread at a time. A week into the process, my lawyer found what we needed, an inconsistency in the land transaction, a signature timestamp that didn't match the date they claimed they informed me. In other words, legal proof they had already sold it before ever mentioning anything to me. A lie with a date and time. We prepared a notice, formal, strong, undeniable, and sent it to their home. That evening, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Salim calling, Farah calling, then Salim again. But I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Sometimes, silence is the loudest answer. Later that night, at nearly 11 p.m., someone knocked on my door, hard, repeatedly. I knew who it was. I stood, straightened my shawl, and walked toward the noise. My heart wasn't racing this time. It was steady, almost calm. When I opened the door, Salim stood there, red-faced, breathing heavily. Farah hovered behind him, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. Salim held up the legal notice and barked, "What is this? You think you can threaten us with lawyers? Us?" His voice echoed in the hallway, bouncing off the walls, but I didn't flinch. I simply stepped aside and said, "Come in, both of you. We need to talk." They entered, tense and restless. The same living room where they once laughed with me now felt smaller, tighter, like the truth had stolen all the air. I sat across from them, hands resting on my knees. Salim threw the papers onto the table. "You're accusing us of theft? Your own brother?" I met his eyes. "I'm accusing you of selling something that wasn't yours to sell." Farah looked down, her fingers twisting her dupatta. Salim scoffed. It was ours. It was from your share. You never even used it." "And that gave you the right to take it?" I asked softly. He opened his mouth to speak, but for the first time he didn't have an answer. Farah lifted her eyes slowly. There was guilt in them, and something like shame. But guilt doesn't undo damage, and shame doesn't build futures. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but firm. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt a boy who trusted you, a boy who thought you loved him." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Salim looked away. I felt something inside me harden, not my heart, but my boundaries. This was the moment I realized something profound. Sometimes blood is not the measure of family. Behavior is. And theirs had spoken loudly.
Salim and Farah stayed frozen in my living room, their silence filling the space like thick smoke, the kind that makes your throat tighten before you even take a breath. Salim kept tapping his foot against the leg of the table like he was trying to shake off responsibility the way people shake sand off their shoes after walking through dirt. Farah just stared at her hands, her wedding ring turning slowly under her thumb. I watched them both, not with anger, but with clarity. Before I could speak again, Farah's voice broke the stillness. "We didn't think it would hurt him," she whispered. "He's smart. He could have gone somewhere cheaper." Cheaper. That one word felt like a slap. My nephew had worked his entire childhood like he was running a marathon with a backpack full of memories heavier than any child should carry. Top grades, scholarships, late-night studying with a lamp older than he was. And they wanted to shrink his dreams down to something cheaper? Salim stood up abruptly. "It's done. You can't undo a sale," he said sharply. "There's no point in dragging our name through the mud." I looked up at him, steady and unblinking. "Our name dragged itself through the mud the moment you sold that land without telling me." His face tightened. For the first time, I saw fear behind his anger, fear of consequence. A man who thought family loyalty would cover wrongdoing was now realizing it couldn't. Farah whispered, "Please, can't we talk privately? Not in front of everyone?" I tilted my head slightly. "Farah, there is no everyone. It's just us." She swallowed hard. Then it hit me. She wasn't talking about this moment. She was talking about what she feared was coming. Public exposure, judgment, the community knowing. Because in our circles, trust is as valuable as land, and once you lose it, you cannot buy it back. I let out a slow breath. "I gave you both a chance to talk to me before I took any legal step," I said, "but you chose silence and secrecy." Salim snapped. "We didn't tell you because we knew you'd react like this." I raised an eyebrow. Like what? Like someone who deserves respect? Someone who worked herself to the bone raising a child that wasn't hers? Someone whose last piece of security you sold without blinking? He had no answer. Not one. I could feel the shift happening, the moment when a private betrayal begins to spill into the world outside the walls that tried to hide it. That shift came the very next morning. Word spreads in families like wind through a wheat field, quietly at first, then suddenly everywhere. By noon, 3 of my relatives had called. By evening, 2 neighbors knocked on my door just to check on me. By the next day, Salim's phone was blowing up more than mine. People weren't cruel, but they were shocked. A brother selling his sister's asset behind her back? A best friend benefiting from it? A child's future caught in the crossfire? Every detail hit like stones in still water, rippling wider and wider. The final blow came when my nephew's college counselor called. "Auntie, he told us about the situation," the counselor said gently. "If there's any community help needed, we can speak to the donors board." That evening, my nephew came home looking like someone had pulled the ground out from under his feet.
I didn't want them to think bad of you, he said quietly. I didn't know what else to do. I held his face in my hands. Betta, nothing they say will ever make me small, and nothing they did will ever make you unworthy. He nodded, but his eyes were heavy, that heaviness children get when they realize adults can fail them too. 2 days later, an elder in our extended family called both me and Salim. "Come to the community hall this Saturday," he said. "This matter cannot stay half hidden. It needs clarity." Salim tried to talk his way out of it, claimed it was a private family misunderstanding. But elders don't get involved unless something serious has cracked the center of things. Saturday came. The hall was filled. A dozen elders, a few cousins, 2 aunts who always smelled faintly of jasmine oil, and my nephew sitting beside me, his fingers tapping nervously against his notebook. Salim and Farah walked in together. Farah's face was pale. Salim's shoulders were tight. The elder cleared his throat. "We are here for transparency," he said. "Explain why you sold land that did not fully belong to you." For a moment, no one spoke. You could hear the ceiling fan creak with every rotation. Salim tried to speak confidently. "It was hers." "It was registered under her name," the elder corrected softly. "And what?" Salim challenged. The elder leaned forward. "And when something is under someone's name, only they decide its future." Salim's jaw twitched. Another elder spoke. His voice was gentle but firm in a way that felt like truth pressing down. "A sister trusted you. A child depended on that trust. This is not a small misstep." Farah's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't mean harm," she whispered. We thought she wouldn't need it." I felt a deep ache move through my chest, not pain, not anger, just the realization of how casually they had dismissed everything I'd built. One of the aunts shook her head. "Harm done without intent is still harm." The room fell quiet. Salim lowered his gaze. It was the first time he didn't try to defend himself. The elders discussed restitution, how they would compensate if at all, how trust could be rebuilt, what legal and moral steps were necessary. By the end, the community had made it clear. Salim and Farah were wrong. Compensation had to be addressed. My nephew's education must be secured. And the family reputation, their reputation, had suffered a blow they would have to answer for. We left the hall quietly. People nodded to me with respect as I walked out, but no one met Salim's eyes, and Farah, she wept silently into her dupatta. Consequences had arrived, not revenge, just truth standing in full daylight. The first morning after the community meeting, I woke before Fajr, sunlight spilling weakly through the curtains. There was a quiet in the house that didn't feel like emptiness anymore. It felt possible. I made tea and walked to the window. Outside, birds were busy in their own lives, chirping, fluttering, building nests. Somehow, seeing them made me realize that life, even after betrayal, keeps moving, and so must we. Ayan walked past my room in his school uniform. His hair was messy, but his eyes had a glint I hadn't seen in days. Cautious hope. He paused, looked at me, and smiled faintly. Not the carefree smile of before the storm, but one that carried the resilience of a child who has been protected, loved, and now trusted to stand tall. "You look calm, Auntie," he said softly. I poured him tea, careful not to spill. I had to be. The storm doesn't last forever, but what we do after, that matters more. He sipped and nodded. The words sank in. I realized something that morning. For 16 years, I had been raising him not just as a guardian, but as a teacher of life, of strength. And now it was my turn to let him see that people who break trust are not the end of the world. They are a lesson, and life continues beyond their lies. Over the next weeks, I focused on rebuilding what had been shaken. With the lawyer's help, I secured a partial restitution from Salim and Farah, enough to cover Ayan's tuition and expenses. The land that had been sold could not be returned, but the moral and financial correction was a small justice I could finally hold in my hands. I also opened a separate account for Ayan's future, not to protect him from life, he would need to learn the lessons of disappointment eventually, but to ensure that no one could take away what was rightfully his again. Each deposit felt like a brick in a wall of security, a promise I made to myself and to him. At home, we started small rituals again: tea in the morning, evening walks, reading before bed. Slowly, laughter returned, soft, cautious, but alive. We didn't talk much about what happened unless he asked. When he did, I answered honestly, without shame, without anger. "Why did they do it, Auntie?" he asked one night. "They let selfishness grow," I said. "Sometimes people think of themselves before anyone else, and sometimes they forget that what belongs to another is never truly theirs." He nodded and hugged me tightly. That hug, warm and trusting, felt like a balm over months of hurt. It reminded me that our bond was stronger than betrayal, that love nurtures what deceit tries to destroy. Months later, I began to feel something I hadn't in a long time, a sense of normalcy. The house was quiet, yes, but in that quiet I found peace. I enrolled in a few community workshops, started teaching local children basic computer skills, and spent afternoons helping Ayan explore his interests beyond textbooks. I even allowed myself to dream again, small dreams, a visit to a place I'd always wanted to see, a quiet vacation with Ayan, a simple celebration of life without fear of interference. The betrayal of Salim and Farah became less like a wound and more like a shadow I could acknowledge without letting it control me. I forgave them silently, not because what they did was acceptable, but because carrying the anger would only weigh me down. Forgiveness, I realized, was a gift I gave myself, not them. Ayan, too, began to find his voice again. He applied for scholarships, participated in debates, and smiled more freely. One afternoon, he looked up at me and said, "I think I can do it, Auntie. I think college is really possible." And for the first time in months, I believed it too. Looking back, I understand now what life tried to teach me. Pain does not always come to break us. Sometimes it comes to show us our own strength. Trust, once shattered, can be rebuilt, not by controlling others, but by protecting what truly matters: love, responsibility, and integrity. Betrayal is loud and messy, but healing is quiet and deliberate. Every step we took, every document we checked, every conversation we held, every small act of rebuilding was a reclaiming of our lives. I realize that life is not measured by the hands that try to steal from us, but by the hands we hold when the storm has passed. Ayan's laughter, the smell of tea in the morning, the warmth of the shared blanket during winter nights, these are the treasures that cannot be stolen. Even Salim and Farah, when they finally faced the truth, were forced to reckon with their choices. They apologized, yes, but more importantly, they learned, painfully, that deceit leaves marks, not just on the betrayed, but on those who betray. And I learned, above all, the future belongs to those who nurture it, protect it, and never let betrayal define it. As I sit here tonight, sipping my tea and listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan, I feel a strange mixture of relief and quiet strength. The house is calm. Ayan is asleep in the next room, his dreams filled with the hope we fought so hard to preserve. I think about betrayal, how it can shake the foundation of a life you've carefully built, and yet I also think about the human capacity to heal, to rebuild, and to protect the things that truly matter. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of truth being seen, of promises being kept, and of a child's future finally secured. And sometimes the greatest triumph is simply standing firm, even when those you trust have faltered. I have forgiven Salim and Farah, not because what they did was acceptable, but because holding on to anger would only have weighed me down. I have learned that strength is not about revenge. It's about protecting love, preserving trust, and moving forward with dignity. So I leave you with this question. If someone you loved betrayed you, how would you protect the ones who depend on you and yourself without letting the betrayal define you? Life will always test us. People may fail us, but our choices, how we respond, how we nurture what truly matters, define who we are. If this story touched you or reminded you of your own struggles and triumphs, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of courage, resilience, and love, please subscribe and stay with me. Because sometimes the hardest storms lead to the most profound mornings.